Hi, I'm Daz. I'm the producer of The Drift, and we're now at a position where I've edited all the scenes that we've shot so far. There are a couple of other scenes that we haven't even filmed yet, and it was always the case that those little scenes would be shot at a later date anyway. So in terms of our plan, we are achieving our objectives. It's a really big deal for us to be in this position, because it's only been, it sounds like a long time I suppose in some ways, but it's been about 10 weeks since we finished filming, and in the space of 10 weeks, we go to work, and I've also been away from home as well on jobs, so my exposure to the editing kit is limited. So I think to have edited the whole film in terms of a storyboard edit, a rough cut as sort of described in the previous diaries, is a really good thing. And that's not a big yay me, it's about the effect that will have on the production, because what that now means is that not only do we have a script that we can read, which is one way of looking at a movie, we have a rough movie to look at, and that means that we can start looking more creatively now at the whole sort of post-production phase, and it's opening up all sorts of ideas about how we can make the film better that we hadn't thought of before. And it's one of the, it sort of goes back to one of my sort of theories, not so much of a theory, but sort of one of the things I was taught in my sort of training in the military, which is the best thing you can do is make the right decision, the second best thing you can do is make the wrong decision, and the worst thing you can do is make no decision. Well, the idea of this is that when you're editing, there's no way, well, that's a bit, okay, it's very unlikely that your first cut is the cut you're going to use. So arguably that's like it's a wrong direction. But by going in that direction, by taking that decision and editing it without fear, it means that it gives you ideas about how to then move it into its next direction. It's always better to go somewhere than nowhere. And it's not just about going in the right way, and like I say, it's about exposing you to more ideas and thoughts that just by watching an edit can suddenly inspire you, in terms of music, in terms of the grand scheme. Because when you edit each scene, you edit it in isolation, obviously, and sometimes you edit a bit of a scene in isolation, and it's only when you then perhaps join it together with another scene that you actually start to see the context more clearly. Certainly more clearly even in the script, especially since the actors may deliver a line differently to what was originally anticipated, or there may be other lines or extra lines that were put in during filming. So, or the reactions of the actors' characters in there as well can also infer a slightly different direction you may not have thought about, and you only get that when you get that first full cut. So it means now, so specifically then, so what does it mean in terms of the next stage of production? Well, it means things like I can start looking at the score. Now, some guys involved in the post-production have written some bits of score music and styles, and I've given them some ideas of temp tracks and stuff like that. A temp track is basically a piece of music that's already established, that's already in the public domain, that's in a movie, and you overlay that over the video footage to give the composers an idea of the type of style you're going for, and along with explanation, it gives them more guidance and direction as to what it is you're trying to achieve in regards to music. So it means we can start looking at that. It means we can start thinking more about visual effects in terms of the storytelling, because some of the visual effects, again as sort of mentioned before, is about storytelling in its own right. Some of the sort of external CGI shots, there is no live action, so the whole storytelling during those shots is all through CGI, and that's not always easy to do. Storyboards is a sort of starter point, references to other movies of how they tell the story through CGI, through movement of spaceships and stuff like that. But really, it's when you start putting the scenes together, because it becomes specific then to your movie. It's good to use other examples, but ultimately you've got to make it relevant to your film. So by having the full cut, it enables us to do that. It also is allowing me to look at things like sort of within the editing itself, in terms of the pace of editing, pace of the scenes, and what is slow, what is too fast, what is not clear, what is too obvious. That's the other thing about, what are we giving away that we don't want to give away too much of. I don't think it would be giving too much away to say that when you put all the scenes together, there's certainly a lot of walking through corridors, which in a spoof I suppose would be good. In a drama, in a serious story, then there has to be a reason for everything that happens. You can't get away with sort of a slowing down of the film just to walk through a corridor, so that's going to require some ruthless editing, because it may be the case, and I don't know right now until I start really going into the edit, that we remove almost entire sets that we built, and perhaps to the more inexperienced editor or producer, you wouldn't do that. In fact, in a film that we made, Doom Raiders, which you can buy on Amazon, by the way, it featured a scene where we went into a bomb dump range place where they basically blow stuff up in Cyprus. It was purely because the guys out there at the time made this facility available and actually blew some stuff up for us, that we kept it in the film, because even then, relatively inexperienced at that time, we knew that the pace of the film was slowing right down, but we kept it in simply because of the effort the guys had gone into. Now, that's a good reason to keep it in as a community project, and this is a community project in many ways, but it's also meant to be a kind of sort of stepping stone into a more serious level of production, of capability. So this time, I think, bearing in mind that the same people that built the sets we may get rid of would have built all the other ones too, they're still going to get their stuff seen on screen. So, like I say, no decision's been taken yet, and I wouldn't want to give it too much away, but it just looks like there's a lot of walking around, and unless something's actually happening or there's some sort of relevance in the story, then it has to go. So that's going to be interesting. Also, in terms of the edit, looking more creatively as well about how we tell the story. So, for example, in the film, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Try not to give anything away. But are these things happening at the same time, and we're just going from place A then to place B and place C, or could we actually have all the three sort of areas happening and then just keep cutting back and forth as they all go along, which would create a lot more sort of dynamic for the audience, I think. Again, I don't want to reveal stuff, but there are things that are happening that if you watch the whole scene as it stands, it starts to drag a bit. It's like, okay, well, yeah, we get that now, But if you're cutting back and forth, there's two things that you can achieve by doing it, or more than two things. But the two things specifically I'm thinking of is, one is you can just create interest in terms of the audience is thinking about this, and then it has to think about that, and then it goes back to that again, and it knows that the two things are happening at the same time, which creates a sense of dynamics. But the second thing is you can accelerate time, because whenever you cut away from a scene and go back to it, it's perfectly acceptable to make it look like it's 10 minutes later, for example. So in a scene in isolation, say for example the guy walks from one end of the spaceship to the other, I'm just making that up, but if that's it, if you cut from him starting to walk and the next shot is the guy actually at the place he wants to be in the spaceship, you don't need to see the whole bit in the middle. You just cut it out, and the audience gets that. They understand he started off there and now he's over there. So you can actually shorten the time, compress time, which is a good thing, because the movie at the moment is currently standing at 2 hours and 5 minutes, which is a very long time. I'm not too worried about that. I've read some things online about, your first cut really, if you're aiming for a 90-minute movie, your first cut should be around perhaps 100 minutes. But the difference is with the storyboard cut that we've got is that it's not... it's nowhere near the final cut. It is literally, we've got duplication of script lines and deciding which angles we're going to go for. It's very, very early days. And if I was just to take out all that and just have one piece of dialogue said once rather than perhaps 3 times in some scenes, because I'm trying to sort out the angle, it would shorten the film down very, very quickly. So I'm not worried about that yet. I'm not looking at the time of the film at the moment yet, because it's just so far down the road. And sort of the last thing about the whole sort of the cut as to where it is at the moment is that it's very quick, it's very easy to see how good the film is going to be. that sounds a bit big-headed, I suppose, but it's not meant to be in terms of, oh, I think the movie's going to be great because I made it. It's about, you can see there's a lot of good shots. When you edit the film, you're editing a scene at a time. You're sort of focused on each scene as you go through, and then suddenly you slap them all together and you watch perhaps 5 or 6 scenes in a row, and it's obvious. I mean, it's obvious when you say it, but it's not until you see it, I suppose, that the whole story comes to life. That you see it, it's there in front of you, no matter how simple the edit is, because at this stage it is a relatively simple edit. And the sound hasn't been touched or anything like that. So the dialogue levels are all over the place, and you can hear action and cut. But even with that, regardless of all that, you can still see the story coming to life, much more so than you would just by reading it. I think, certainly for me, because I'm not a particularly good reader. I like to watch stuff rather than read stuff. But that in itself, it inspires sort of coming full circle now in terms of where, but by bringing it all together and just watching a film, even if it's not the final edit, it provides you with that that direction, which I think is really good. So I think, to sort of conclude, really, it kind of inspires me to make sure that this film, there's so much potential in it, and that's a really good place to be when you make a film, I suppose. And there are some areas that are weak, and we're looking at solutions to how we can make that more exciting. There are some bits that we'll probably take out that now, watching it, doesn't quite look as good when you join up with other bits. But it certainly makes me feel that I really need to take my time and make a quality production, and I'm far more confident now about, first of all, achieving that, and secondly, confident about sort of telling people, especially those who are involved, say, "Oh, Daz, when's it getting ready? How long is it going to be?" I feel much more comfortable now, sort of saying to them, "You're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to wait, because I want this to be right." And the delay isn't taking a long time. Isn't just about taking a long time for the sake of it. It's about making sure that there's a good story here. There's some great dialogue, and there's some good acting, and there's good acting all the way through. But I mean, there's some really good moments, some real, for us again, in terms of being realistic in what we've produced in the past. There's some really good stuff. So I want to do that justice. And there's no reason why we can't start making other movies in the meantime, while this has been dealt with in post-production. But I want everything to be as good as we can make it, and give the movie a chance to be that good. And that's all come from basically just watching, a 2 hour and 5 minute storyboard edit. So that's a very good place to be. I think overall that's. I've been in worse places before, in terms of recovery and having to sort of pick bits up and stuff in the past with other films. It's like being, how are we going to get out of this? Very few mistakes in this film. There are some, and some we're not going to be able to get rid of, and you'll just see those when they happen. But they're not major issues. They're just small bits and bobs that you may or may not see. So yeah, it's good. The next thing now then is to start getting the edit more finely tuned, and that will then enable the visual effects guys to start working on specific shots and stuff. Also in a position now for the sound guys, to get people interested in making sound effects and stuff. We're almost there that they can start watching it themselves and producing noises and effects, too. There's all this stuff that comes from creating this sort of first cut, even though it's probably 10, 15, 20 cuts away from the final edit. That's a really good place to be. So I'm very pleased at the moment.